coming on this year, commencing in the middle of this year, and they come with the new features that that you approved, the previous commission approved, which includes the CCTV cameras, which has enhanced service safety features for our customers and our operators, passenger counters on every one of them, and they're enabled for Wi-Fi if we choose to turn that feature on in the future. The transit budget that's before you also funds the expanded train service on the O-Train Trillium line. And for 5 years in a row, fare increases are held to 2.5% or less, and this budget recommends fare increases at 2.5% commencing July 1st. We're also very excited to announce that the budget provides $1 million for investments in new improved service, adding midday, evening, and weekend service in our fast-growing areas of the city, and I'll list those at the end of the presentation. And we also are providing an additional 5,700 more paratransport trips for our customers, and we're very excited about that. It also includes cost recovery services for FIFA and our partnership with OSEG. The foundation for the budget is based on things that are listed on this slide, and I can't speak enough about the alignment with the Transit Affordability Plan. This is a critical document, and it's the glue that holds your affordability together. It's where you've approved the strategies that gets you the future affordability, not just for light rail, but for all your transit modes. It gets you everything from bus stops to improvements to the transitway to the light rail expansion. And so that's where your revenue cost ratio targets, which are very important for you in terms of that affordability plan. It's where the contribution strategies and where you're forecasting your projections and where the 2.5% fare increase strategy also is spoken about. And it also assists in terms of ensuring that you're aligned with what you wish to do in the future. The budget is based on an allocation increase of 1.75% assessment growth, and it's built on ridership of 97.3 million customer trips on our bus and train services and 783 customer trips for paratransport. That generates a fare revenue of $188 million for bus, train, and para services. With those level of riderships, the revenue cost ratio is budgeted to be 53%, and that's a very good number. It's in alignment with the strategy. It speaks to your affordability goals, and again, enables you to keep that affordability plan held together in the future. With respect to diesel fuel, I want to thank our finance partners. They've done an amazing job in doing what that fuel hedging strategy is supposed to do, and that's to give you budget certainty. And for clarity, they hedge up to 18 months in advance of a year. So 73% of the 2015 volume has been hedged. And I want to remind everybody this is for diesel fuel. That's obviously what we consume. It's not what you see the price at the pumps. We're sometimes compared to that. So in 2014, we were at about $1.05 per liter. In 2015, thanks to the finance strategy, fuel is priced at $1.01, resulting in a budget reduction of $1.7 million, which we've invested in the single most important thing, service. So in terms of operating, this is how the $500 million budget rolls up. The bottom line is the target of $7.9 million, which we've achieved, and that's achieved through various iterations of reviewing all our pressures and making very difficult choices and decisions with a goal of value and customer service being the overarching principles, and then we apply the affordability lens to it. So to maintain our services, about $8.1 million. That's everything from collective agreements, fuel, utility costs, and so forth. There's growth, Trillium line, service in the growth area, the paratransport trips. There's a base adjustment of 2014, and then there's the revenue that gets generated from the increase. In terms of transit capital, there are millions of dollars of investments being done through your affordability plan. There's the bus refurbishment, and what this is our buses last 15 years. To ensure that that life is achieved, you proactively refurbish them at year 7, and that's a bus strip down, they repaint them, they take care of the seats, they do all sorts of things to the vehicles, and it extends the life to 15 years, and that's a very good program with significant dividends to the organization. There's the fare control system for the Confederation line and the Trillium line, which was previously approved. This is the funding authority of $25 million so that you have state-of-the-art fare system for your new systems. And then there's the Confederation line readiness, as you heard at the orientation session the other day, everything from control room changes, the train simulator for safety training, and our customer information wayfinding program that is necessary outside of the build area so that the entire system is integrated into the Confederation line and the Trillium line. There's transitway and system improvements. We continue to run our transitway and our overall bus system, so there's $2.6 million of investment in that. And then, again, you saw some of these systems the other day, the paratransport and conventional service scheduling software upgrades of $2.2 million to keep them current, robust, and reliable. There's bus stops and shelters, important for that customer value proposition. There's almost $1 million invested there. And our continuous improvement program on station accessibility of $500,000. And then we also, the last line is very important. You maintain what you have. And so there's almost $24 million of life cycle of our assets, which again feeds into the affordability plan to ensure that you're managing things when their life cycles are needed in terms of adjustments. So in terms of the service improvements, we have the O-Train Trillium line expansion. We have Bank Street, Barhaven South, Hunt Club Road, Canada North, Canada South, Stittsville, Orleans South, and paratransport trips. And our strategy on this is Mr. Scrimger and his planning group have some ideas on some of the areas of concerns. We've heard from the ward councillors on these areas. We would like to, we'll be reaching out to the ward councillors and work with them to solidify the solutions in these areas in time for the budget deliberations. And then the other piece, Mr. Chair, is that the ATU report forms part of today's tabling and it follows the budget process along, so we'll deliberate that when we do the budget also. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manconi, and thank you to the entire team at OC Transpo for putting this together and delivering a budget that has reliability and affordability and customer service as its focus. If there are any questions, again, very high-level questions, Councillor Commissioner Cloutier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mr. Manconi, the 97.3 million trips, is that an increase or a decrease?
Mr. Chair, that's a very slight increase from the most recent 12 months. Right now, as we look back the last 12 months, we were at 96.8 million customers, so it's a very small increase.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much through you to Mr. Manconi for the presentation. It may be in here, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. My question is whether Mr. Manconi could tell us how much additional revenue will be realized through the increase in the OC Transpo fare. So what is that line item, which may be somewhere in here, but I haven't found it yet? Thanks.
It's in here. I'll need a minute to find that.
Okay, so as we're searching for that, I think Councillor Leeper might have a question.
I have two quick questions. First, there's several $1 million worth of IT strategic initiatives that are in the capital budget. Do you consult at all, just really out of curiosity, with the IT subcommittee? Or is that done in a silo?
Absolutely not in a silo. We're part of the corporate committee that reports to Mr. Kanalakis, and there's full alignment. And the areas that we have some more focus from a pure IT perspective are those systems that are totally independent and are only attributable to the bus service. We are on the corporate platforms for all our internal systems and so forth, and we have to comply with the corporate standards in terms of those systems. And there's a lot of dialogue. So, for example, VoIP, we're using the corporate VoIP system and so forth. So we're not a silo.
So it's relatively holistic. And then secondly, with respect to the fare increases that are listed, do we have access to the projected impact of each of those fares and your analysis in terms of how that might affect ridership and affordability for different groups?
I would suspect not for today, but we have a detailed explanation of how the elasticity works in terms of inflation, ridership, and so forth. And I look to the chair for direction if you want us to do individual discussions on that or speak to that. But there is a whole financial model and a transit perspective on how those levers affect each other.
Yeah, I think over the course of the next 2 weeks, I think there's a lot of opportunity to speak to OC Transpo officials about that level of detail. And if, for one reason or another, you think it's important to debate during the budget on the 18th, or would like to change any policies or budget items related to that, then on the 18th, that would be the best time to.
Is it possible, Mr. Chair, that we can make some of those elasticity studies public?
Well, I have to speak to Mr. Manconi about exactly the format that those studies are in.
There's generic stuff that's available, but we have a presentation that we can share with you, Councillor, and then from that you can give us direction on that through the chair. There's nothing there that we're concerned about at all. It's basic transit perspectives and industry best practices.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Anything else, Councillor? Councillor Brockington has a question. If you might want to just come and grab a microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity, and Councillor Cloutier for your seat. Just with respect to projections, I would like to know if OC Transpo has how far they project ridership, because we've seen some mild fluctuations with changes to employment here in Ottawa. How far out do we project ridership?
The Transit Affordability Plan, which is a public document, has long-term projections, which our planning department feeds into. In terms of our current ridership, the last quarter of last year, we've seen the decline stop. We had a bit of an increase, as a matter of fact. We'll be reporting on that later on at the Transit Commission. But the projections that are in the affordability plan are straight-line projections. So we do month-to-month reviews of our forecasts.
Thank you. With respect to the $1 million improvement, improved service, I saw, and rightly so, a lot of the focus for fast-growing communities in the city. Is it also a continued process to review the urban core? I mean, through you, Mr. Chair, in River Ward, we have our own challenges, sure, and I want to know what that balance is between focusing on ensuring growing communities have transit services versus the urban core.
So, Councillor Brockington, given that we're tabling the budget today, it's not the time to get into area-specific or community-specific issues relating to transit. Certainly, if you do have transit priorities for your community, please communicate those to myself and to Mr. Scrimgeour and Mr. Manconi, and they'll be happy to look at it between now and the 18th when we debate the budget, and there may be solutions that can be achieved within the existing envelopes, and if not, you can by all means bring motions forward on the 18th relating to that.
I appreciate that, and I will tease out over the coming weeks that type of information, but given that the presentation today did have a bullet on $1 million, particularly for high growth areas, I thought I would ask a question about the focus for the urban core. But I can follow up offline. I don't mind doing that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Commissioner Milner.
No, I was just sorry. I was asking for a copy of the budget if we have paper copies available.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, it's a number of paratransport increases are in there. I saw on the slide quickly, and unfortunately, we don't have a copy of the slide in our package as we usually do. What percentage increase is that? It was 5,500 more trips, I think it said.
I believe you do about 783,000 trips a year.
So 5,500 trips.
5,700 on that.
And the addition was 5,500, I think, so it's minuscule then.
I would not describe it as minuscule. For anybody who's looking for a trip, anything we can offer is an improvement. As you know, the demand for paratransport always exceeds our capacity, and I'm confident to say that the paratransport community would welcome any increase.
Well, yeah, obviously that will be. I just was wondering if maybe it's a long term. Get the report later in the year.
Commissioner Wilkinson?
Yeah.
Today is not the time to debate specifics about details in the budget. It's for very high-level questions.
Well, this is a high-level question because I think it relates to population changes in the community, the aging community, and various other things. And the question really is, are we, in doing the budget, modifying the way we do it in order to take account of the changes in demographics, which is a high-level.
That is a high-level question, yes.
Mr. Chair, through you, later this year you will have a white paper exercise coming to you on the paratransport review of the service, and all of those parameters will be put out to the Commission in terms of dialogue. We've said over and over again, you've heard me say that we need to assess paratransit services and where we want to go with it, and funding and affordability has to be part of that, eligibility criteria, aging demographics, vehicle types, all those things, and innovation in terms of how we push people to accessible low-floor buses, which is 100% of your fleet and your trains. So that discussion is coming. In the meantime, we thought that the budget was an ideal opportunity to close some of those refusal rates that we do see.
I might say that thank you for having some money. For 3 years, there's been no increase, and I actually, for a member of the Commission, I had a meeting about buses last night in my ward because in new growth areas we've had none. I took 2 express routes, made them into 3 with the same number of buses. Now I have 3 routes, all unhappy. And we did go, though, a few years ago in the central core trying to get 15-minute service in the central area. Is the idea with the expansion of the money that's coming in, are we trying to do the same thing in outlying areas? I guess it's not going to be enough, or is it moving in that direction?
I want to clarify the new fast-growing areas, and it speaks to Councillor Brockington's question. All of the warrants of your service criteria have been met. So we're putting the service where there is a real demand for it and a need. You can never have enough, I understand that. But in terms of the other tweaks and adjustments that are being alluded to, that gets done through our floor adjustments throughout the year, and we do the best we can with the resources we have. This money is for fast-growing areas that meet the council warrants and principles of the service.
No service, so yeah. Okay. So and I'd like to thank you for that. And the other question, it's just gone out of my head right now, but I'll come back if I remember.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eglai.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple quick questions, Mr. Manconi. The money that is going to be going into paratransport, the increase, is that just going to go to increased, not routes, but rides, or is it also going to look at potential enhancements for the booking system? Or is that a discussion we're going to have down the road?
No, the booking system is underway. That's part of the capital work that's being done. So both from the Smart Card initiative and the online booking and all those things, that's underway, and that's funded. This is for straight capacity, put it to the service.
And this is a little offside, but perhaps, Chair, let me ask the question. When can we expect to hear back on the progress of the booking enhancements?
We can give you an update one-on-one if you want. In terms of more details, we can do that later this year. It's progressing.
That would be great. I would appreciate that. The other question is, I just going back to where we were talking about more service in growth areas. Are we talking in terms of growth areas simply residential service, or are we also talking about commercial service?
Mr. Chair, we have areas where growth is occurring both in commercial and residential, and where the service standards would indicate that we should be adding more service than is currently there.
Yeah, thank you, because the question largely relates to Hunt Club, and we can have that discussion after offline, but thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eglai. Councillor Kadri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this question may be a little bit premature, Mr. Manconi, but the services that you're talking about or speaking about in terms of enhancement going forward that you're going to be discussing with individual wards and councillors, any number to that at the present time? Have you figured? I know it's maybe, like I said, too early, but you must have a number in mind as to how many trips or how many dollars that you would be adding?
Yes, Mr. Scrimger has some ideas, but what we talked about is best that we check in with the ward councillor because, for example, in your particular area, you've had some real pressures that you're dealing with, and you're at the point that you meet the service criteria, so we're going to present to you our best technical options, and we can consult on that and bring it back.
Thank you for that, Mr. Manconi, but I'm still wondering if you have a global number for those services in mind, because I know it will change up and down, but...
It's $1 million in service.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Kadri. Commissioner Marlowe.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering when OC Transpo has a surplus, like you did last year, particularly in the operation funds for fuel, who and how is the decision made to reinvest those funds in service delivery versus mitigating potential fare increases for the coming year?
Mr. Chair, it's best that the Treasurer explain that process.
OC Transpo is, at the end of the year, close the books. If they have a surplus, it goes back into their reserve. And the reserve is basically set aside for dealing with years when they don't have a surplus, in other words, a deficit, or for capital works. So we have a budget approved guideline here, which is that we do not use one-time sources of revenue for permanent expenditures. So we would never allow OC Transpo to say, I'm going to use some of the reserve this year to keep the fares lower, because we know all that's going to happen is that one-time money goes away, and the year after that, you're stuck with a double increase. So permanent expenditures need permanent sources of revenue, and transfers from reserves are one time.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner? Do any other commissioners or councillors in the room have any questions?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Scrimger has that answer to
the revenue
question.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Chair, the page in the budget document, which is entitled Transit User Fees, which lists each one of the fare recommendations, shows at the bottom right that there's $2.4 million more.
Can you say?
I'm sorry, there's $2.4 million more brought in by the fare changes that are recommended.
Can you give the budget page for that?
I don't have a number for the page. It's the page that's marked Transit User Fees, and it's a table that I believe is the last page before the capital pages begin.
Wonderful, thank you. The detailed committee budgets are available online and will be in the shared drive this afternoon. Yes, Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and Mr. Scrimger. So just so that I understand, I see the 2.4 million figure. So is that assuming no changes in ridership, or is the assumption, back to the elasticity question, as you increase the fare, does the 2.4 then predict a certain loss of ridership due to the fact that the fares are increasing? So on what basis, on what projection is the 2.4 million made?
97.3 million.
The 2.4 million increase is on the basis of the ridership level that is forecast for this year, the 97.3 million that we spoke about. And we can certainly talk to you further about how we get to that point and how elasticity works when there's larger changes that are much different from inflation than we're talking about this year. But it's not it doesn't really come into play this year.
So revenue projections are based on the 97.3 million customer trips from slide 3. Wonderful, thank you. Any follow-up?
Only to say, I think, further to Councillor Leeper's question, I think I certainly would benefit from having at our, whatever the date is, February 18th, meeting a presentation from OC Transpo on the elasticity with relation to the projections for next year. So that would be very helpful for my edification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair, Councillor Kakish.
Just a question for Mr. Manconi in terms of how we compare to other municipalities in terms of the fares across the city.
In terms of the fare increase for this year, Mr. Scrimger and his team did a look. It's all over the map. I think there was one at 4%. There's some at 2%. There's some at below 2, so it's a mixed bag. The issue with fare comparison is you have to caution. I know one of my colleagues called me and said, they just had their fare increase approved, but then it got put on hold because their council found out that we had a good value system here where we have free Wednesdays for seniors. They wanted to know how much that costs and so forth. So if you just do the number analysis without the value proposition, I think that's an unfair comparison. And if people like to pull out all the tables and look at the fare schedule, but then they don't factor in, some of the values that you've done, UPass initiatives and so forth. In many respects, we're the envy of other transit agencies in terms of the comprehensive look that we've done in terms of good value for what we provide, good service, and slow and steady increases rather than the 6 and 7% that occurred years ago, where your revenue cost ratio was just diving. It was down at 43%, and it was unsustainable. You wouldn't be building what you're building now.
I guess my other question is, and some of my colleagues touched on it as well, is the growth that we see in the especially suburban neighborhoods, and I just want to make sure that there is offline, we can discuss those details because of the rapid growth and development we see in my area, for example, Riverside, South Finley Creek, or Councillor Wilkinson in Canada and East and wherever the wards are. But there is a lot of growth, there is a lot of development, and that there's flexibility for us within this budget to work offline with Mr. Scrimger and staff to make sure that any of those pockets that are not being serviced properly are addressed.
Absolutely, with the two basic principles of managing the bottom line and compliance with approved standards. We can't sway from those, but certainly our office would be pleased to work with any member of the Commission or Council to look at innovative solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marconi. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. Through you, the transit user fees table lists the proposed increases for each of them. The 2015 revenue column is blank. Do you have the projected revenues for each one of those fare classes?
Just looking at the treasurer to see if that's even possible.
I'm sorry, Councillor, could you repeat the question?
The transit user fees table lists the different fare classes and the proposed increases. The 2015 revenue column at the far right is blank. I'm wondering if you have the numbers associated with each of those.
No, we don't, because we get, for example, cash fares are all different. We get, it comes in as cash. We don't know how much came from a youth versus an adult versus, so we don't have, we could itemize most likely the passes, but the stuff that everyone buys and just throws in the box, no. But we can look to provide you with breakdown on the pass types.
So if we were to want to reduce or increase some of these proposed fares, we wouldn't have an idea of what the offset would need to be from a different fare class.
And that's what they were referencing with the model that they have. If you want to look at different, because the model is very comprehensive, it includes all the fare types and what the projected ridership is in each one, so or usage. So if you wanted to change one, we would feed it into the model and see what the net effect is in terms of the lost revenue.
So that's work that's not best done around this table, but in the run-up to the to our February meeting then?
I would, yes, if you have particular fares that you would like to see what's the impact if we reduce this by this, we can certainly run that through the model and tell you what the overall impact is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, it's great news. Ridership sounds to be stabilizing. That's good news. Mine's more on the gas transfer question. Forgive me. I just got the document. I'm trying to leaf through it quickly. We're getting transfer payments of 36.5, and then last year 33.7. We're kind of going down the mountain. I just want to make sure we're being very conservative in our approach on what we see when it comes to money coming from the province or the feds. I think that's going to the appropriate person over there.
We have adjusted the gas tax revenues in this budget. We've taken it down because the and I can't remember which one of them, I think it was the provincial one, there was actually a slight decrease in. So we have a long-term agreements with them, so we know how much money is coming in. The one in the province fluctuates a little bit depending on overall ridership, so we adjust it. So yes, we are, I can tell you with 100% certainty that those are the funds we're going to get this year.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Eglai.
Thank you very much. And I guess this is to the Treasurer as well. In light of what we're seeing with gas prices and the upcoming budget, are we doing anything different with hedging than we've done previously in preparing this budget?
So, Ms. Simila, can you describe in perhaps in a little detail how hedging works and what was done recently and how we achieved the $1 million in service enhancements?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So as Mr. Manconi indicated, we have a very active hedging policy here at the City of Ottawa, and you enter into hedges, or we enter into hedges for you, sometimes up to 18 months in advance of when they're actually actualized. So we have hedged 73% of your 2015 fuel consumption, and we hedged it at the time, what seemed like a very good price, at about $1.05. Now, the portion that we don't hedge, though, we go in and we do an estimate of what we think that price is going to be, and so that's allowed us to actually, because that price is lower than the hedged price, it's allowed us to take down the overall budget. We've budgeted 2015 at $1 per litre, whereas in 2014 we were budgeting at a little over $1.04 per litre. So it's that unhedged portion that is allowing us to reduce the budget in 2015. What you have to be cognizant of is that you're not just buying fuel in January, you're buying fuel all year long and December as well. And so what's the price going to be in December? So perhaps we're a bit conservative, but we've assumed 88 cents per litre for the entire year. Now, I can tell you it's a little bit lower than that right now, and I expect it to be a heck of a lot higher than that at the end, but I think overall we felt comfortable with 88 cents on the unhedged portion. So combined, the hedged portion at $1.05 and the unhedged at 88 brings you to your $1. In hindsight, yes, if somebody had told us that the price of gasoline or fuel was going to drop, we certainly would not have entered into those hedges. We've looked at all the possibilities that we have available to us to what to do with these hedges. Our advice to you is don't break those contracts, because if you break those contracts, you are going to pay today the difference between what the hedge is set at and what the price of fuel is today. But if the price of fuel, so you'll pay, say it's $1 and your hedge is $1 and the price is 80 cents, you're going to pay that 20 cents regardless. But if the price of fuel in the future goes up to 85 cents, well, guess what? Now you've paid 25 cents more. So you don't want to pay twice. So stick with the hedges that you have. We have already, work we had done last year, we have the hedges already in 2016. We have taken a pause while we're waiting for the markets to settle down, and we can, with a little more certainty, predict where the fuel prices are going in the future. So we have, I think, 20-some% of 2016 hedged, but right now we are not hedging anymore for 2015.
Excellent. Thank you very much. One last call for questions. Seeing none. The item needs to be received, tabled, and referred to the Transit Commission meeting of February 18th. Is that carried? Carried. Thank you very much. And we have revisions to the boundary of the urban transit area for 2015. Is that item tabled? And received and tabled, excuse me? Received. Thank you very much. There are no in-camera items. Are there any inquiries or other business? No. Thank you very much. Adjournment. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.